Well, let's talk about our session today. We're going to be talking about emergency eye wash and shower stations. This is actually a subject that we've not covered individually. We've covered it along with other things that we're talking about, but I think this is a pretty critical topic, especially if you have acid sprayed into your eyes or something like that. An eye wash station becomes your most important thing in the world if you get a corrosive material into your eyes. And so we really want to make sure that we have these things where they're supposed to be and that they're functioning appropriately. So let's dive right in. We ask, why do we have safety eye washes? Well, the critical thing is if you get one of these corrosive materials or injurious liquids, they call those, into your eyes, the first 10 to 15 seconds are really critical to determine how much damage that does to your eyes. And it's not just corrosives. There are a lot of other substances that can do damage. And the real key rule to this is the longer that stuff is in your eyes or on your skin, the more damage it's going to do, the more injury that it will do to you. So we want to keep this stuff, or we want to get this stuff out if it ever gets in there as soon as we possibly can. Safety showers and eye washes will reduce this exposure. If we can get to them quickly and get clean flushing water there as soon as possible, the amount of injury goes down. Now, of course, we want to prevent these exposures. We want to have personal protective equipment on. We want to do all of the things that will minimize this, but should it happen, we want to have this as a backup. This is really first aid. And that's how OSHA sees this: is it's medical. It's medical. They're a medical device to help minimize the amount of damage that happens after exposure to this stuff. Well, why do we have those? In addition to the corrosive liquids that we've talked about, if you were to catch on fire and you had a safety shower in place, it could really do the trick to extinguish the flames. If you get debris into your eyes, dust, metal pieces, other things like that in your eyes, you can use an eye wash station to rinse that out. And then the question is asked, what about bloodborne pathogens? Unfortunately, we see a number of situations where people in local government agencies get blood or other potentially infectious material into their eyes or mucous membranes. And when we talk about bloodborne pathogens, we want to get that out of there as soon as we can as well, because it reduces the likelihood of an infection taking place. And so this might impact places such as public safety, our jails, or potentially our EMS personnel that are out there dealing with people that may end up with a bloodborne pathogen exposure to their eyes. All right. So what are the rules about this? What is the law? And when we look at OSHA, OSHA's a little bit behind the times on this. They haven't updated their standard since it was first promulgated back in 1970. And I would say that's a long time ago, but I'm a 1970 vintage myself, and that would make me old. And so, so say it just hasn't been very long, or it's been a little while since OSHA's updated their standard. But here's what the OSHA standard says: where the eyes or body of any person may be exposed to injurious corrosive materials, suitable facilities for quick drenching or flushing of the eyes and body shall be provided within the work area for immediate emergency use. Shall in OSHA terms means will, gotta, you must do that. And so where we are using these corrosive materials such as high or low pH, so acids or bases, so what kind of things are we talking about? Battery acid, sulfuric acid, caustics like caustic soda, a strong base, other things that may be out there. There are certain organic liquids that can be really injurious to your eyes. So we've got to think about where we might find these things. Some of these are far worse than others. Some of them penetrate deeply into tissue really quickly, and we have to get this rinsing happening really fast. Things like hydrofluoric acid. Now, I don't know any of you out there that are using that, but this is something that can do massive injury to your eyes in just a very short amount of time. Um, so I say the OSHA standard is a little bit outdated. They point towards the ANSI standard. So we say, what's the ANSI standard? ANSI is the American National Standards Institute. This is a voluntary consensus organization that builds standards, and they have a standard out there, Z350 358.1, that was updated in 2014 the last time, that says that covers emergency showers, eye washes, eye face washes, and combination units, and is intended to provide uniform minimum guidelines for their performance, use, installation, test procedures, maintenance, and training. So once we decide we need these things, this tells us how we have to go about doing that. It goes beyond just corrosive liquids, and it says anytime there might be something that could be injurious to your eye, we should be providing this. So let's take a look at our operations and see what that might be. So if we decide that we need an eye wash or shower or combination unit, we've got to decide what to do next. Well, here are decisions that we need to make. Where does it need to be? What kind of station do we need? How many? Because some cases, we may need more than one. Some cases, we may need a dozen of these, depending on our operations. How do we set it up? What does it look like? Where does it need to be? And then how do we maintain it? So common areas where we may see the need for an eye wash shower station would be places like laboratories. So if we're working with corrosives, wastewater, water treatment areas where we're dispensing chemicals or using that as part of our process, shops, and then, like we said, potentially those bloodborne pathogen areas as well. All right. So where does it need to be located? Well, the standard that they give us in the ANSI standard is it needs to be 10 seconds travel time walking from where we're using that chemical, that corrosive liquid or whatever it may be that could harm our eyes. Well, that's roughly 55 feet. They went through and did some testing on it, and they said it's roughly 55 feet. But it comes back to that standard. We need to get to this station really quickly after the exposure happens. Now, why does it have to be that quick? Well, think about it. If you get something that is burning your eyes, getting something that can burn your eyes there, how quickly can you get there? What normally happens is your eyes clamp shut, and you're going to have a hard time getting there. So there's some basic things around this. It needs to be in the same room. I can't be required to go through a doorway to get to the eye wash station, even if it's just in the next room. I can't be required to change levels. I have to go up or down a couple of stairs to get to the eye wash station. That's not appropriate either. I worked in some areas where we had a lot of chemicals, and we also had levels. We had some elevated levels, and we had to put eye wash stations up on the upper level and on the lower level, even though they were really close together. Sometimes they were connected in the same unit, but one was was a couple of stairs up, and the other was a couple of stairs down. So think about these areas, and there shouldn't be obstructions from us getting to it. Thinking if I get something in my eyes, how can I get there quickly and not run into things? All right, there are different kinds of these stations that we can choose. There's hard plumbed. That's the best, right? Because I have basically an unlimited supply of water. Gravity stations are an option. These are ones that you would hang on a wall, and the water stays in it until it's used. and or it runs out of date, and those will have a certain amount of time that they will last. Then we have portable systems. Let's say I'm out on a job site doing some work. They have portable stations that you can pump up with compressed air that will deliver adequate water. And then there are things like a drench hose that you can see in this picture. And that's kind of something that you can do multiple things with, both your eyes as well as washing off your body if you happen to get splashed with something. Okay. So the question would be, are these okay? These are various things that we see out there. And on the far right hand, we see one of these stations that you mount on the wall. They are a gravity unit that when you pull down the yellow portion that you can see there, the water starts to flow and you wash your eyes with that. They can be appropriate, but they need to deliver water for at least 15 minutes. And so that's going to be challenging if we don't have that station full. The other side of these is they're sitting with water in them for extended periods of time, and they have a potential for growing bacteria or other kinds of bad things in there that could be bad for your eyes. And so with these units, they generally have an additive that you put in them to keep them clean and sanitary during that time. What about the one in the middle? This is one that you would put on a sink, and I've seen these a lot of times in laboratories because it's handy to have it there. I've already got a sink. Can that be okay? And the answer is yes, as long as it meets the requirements of the ANSI standard. And the one on the left, these are little eyewash bottles, and it's generally saline solution in these bottles. These don't meet the standard. They're called a personal eyewash. They don't meet the standard of the ANSI requirements. And so we shouldn't be using these in place of a fixed or a portable system. These are just something extra that we could have there to rinse our eyes out, but they're not going to satisfy what we need to have because they won't provide that 15 minutes of flushing time. Okay. All right. So how many of these do I need? Well, they need to be located wherever this type of chemical is being used. And they need to meet that travel time requirements and no obstructions, no going to a different room. So I may have multiples of these stations throughout my facility, or I may be using the same chemical multiple times in different rooms, and I would have to provide that eye wash station or combination unit, shower and eye wash in those locations. Okay. All right. So how do I set it up? Now, I'm just going to come out and say that it's best to just go out and buy a kit. Buy a unit that is set up that meets all of the ANSI standards. If you try to put one together, you can do it, but it's going to be a very difficult task, and the chances that you get everything right are fairly low because it's just very specific how this should work. It needs to be set up in an accessible location where near where we're using the chemicals. Remember that 10-second travel distance. Needs to be set up at the proper height for both the eye wash and the shower. And there's some numbers around this. The eye wash should be between 33 and 45 inches from the floor. And that includes where the paddle valve is that we use to turn it on. I can't just use a regular valve. It needs to be one that if my eyes are clamped shut, I can just reach out and find this paddle and push that and open up the valve. It needs to be roughly 18 inches away from the wall. They give us a little bit of leeway on that, but it can't be too close to the wall. The shower height needs to be between 7 and 8 feet, 82 and 96 inches above the floor, and produce a cone diameter of 20 inches wide, 60 inches above the floor. So at 5 feet, it needs to be 20 inches wide. And that the idea behind that is it just covers my entire body so I can wash should I get splashed with one of these nasty chemicals. And the valve should be no higher than 69 inches high, so people of all different heights can reach up and pull on that. And all of those valves, both of those valves on the eye wash and the shower, need to remain on after I let go. So I can't have a spring-loaded valve that will turn off. So once I turn it on, it should keep flowing until I physically turn it off. Because if I get something in my eyes, I need to be able to hold my eyes open, and I need to be able to help flush that material out. So the water should just continue to flow. All right, here's a little bit more on that. We want to talk about the volume of water. So eye washes need to provide 4/10 of zero point 0.4 gallons of water per minute at a pressure of 30 psi. They need to meet a certain pattern. Now they have a gauge for that that we can use. We just set it over it as it's flowing, and if it hits the right location, then we've met that requirement. And that gauge is in the ANSI standard. The idea is I want to have it the right width and enough volume that it will spray up into my eyes, not cause damage, but be able to wash that material away. Showers need to be able to provide 20 gallons per minute at 30 psi. And that doesn't mean that it's spraying out at 30 psi, but that's if we deliver 30 psi of water to the shower head. And it needs to be able to do that with the 20-inch diameter that we talked about, 60 inches above the floor. And both of these need to provide it for at least 15 minutes. Now, depending on how aggressive the material is that we're dealing with, we may want to ensure that we provide it for far longer than that. But just at that minimum of 15 minutes, think about that. At 20 gallons per minute, that's 300 gallons of water. What's going to happen to all that water, and do we have adequate supplies of that? Now, the gravity systems that we talked about obviously don't have 300 gallons of water. They're under a different standard. And I would only use those in areas where I just don't have the option to use a fixed plumb system. All right. And one other thing that we need to provide, and this was one of the recent ANSI standard updates. They said we need to provide tepid water. And you may ask yourself the question, well, what does tepid mean? Tepid means lukewarm, right? It means it's not too cold and it's not too hot. Because think about that. If you got something in your eyes and you put your face down into this eye wash station, and the water that's coming out of it is ice cold, how long are you going to be able to remain in that eye wash station washing your eyes out? And the answer is not very long. What if the water is hot? You may not be able to be in there at all because it's really hot. So we need to be able to provide tepid water, and that means anywhere between 60 and 100 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a fair range there, but you think about our operations. In the wintertime, our water may be really cold. In the summertime, or if we're by a process, it may heat up. And so how do I provide tepid water? They make things called mixing valves. And these valves, you plumb hot water and cold water to it, and it will automatically give you tepid water. You can see it has a gauge on there, and it will get that water in the right area. Okay. Other things to think about on these systems. How do we maintain them? How do we make sure, how'd you like to run that stuff in your eyes? That's really nasty. Over time, if these stations are not flowed regularly, they can develop rust, they can develop bacterial growth, all kinds of things. And so one of the requirements of the ANSI standard is that we flow it regularly. So I'll do this. Slide in reverse order. We need to flow that system at least once a week. Wow, that's a pretty aggressive inspection schedule. We need to inspect it and flow it weekly. That's the way we're able to. That's the way we are able to ensure that we've got clean water, and that the system will work when we need it to work. You saw in that last video that there were caps on, and those are important to keep debris and contamination out of that eyewash station. So those should be the caps from the manufacturer, and they should be kept in place. Um, all parts need to be in place, and it needs to be functional. That means that there are, if I have this plumbed in with other water systems, they shouldn't be easily turned off. So if somebody can just go turn a valve and disable this important safety device, that's a problem. So I maybe will have to plumb it on its own circuit to ensure that it will stay on when other parts of our water system are turned off. Okay. Once again, clear access, no obstructions. I should be able to walk up to this with my eyes clamped shut and not run into things or not be obstructed from getting to it. A few other details around this. I've seen this a few times where we've had electrical circuits right behind the eye wash and shower station. Well, we might be trading one bad thing for a worse thing if we start spraying down the electrical circuits. So just as you site these things, look where you're putting them and ensure that we have adequate drainage, because we're going to create some nasty slip hazards if we're flowing this each week if we haven't thought about that. So many of these systems will be plumbed. You'll either have a floor drain or a plumb system where a pipe will carry the water away from the eye wash station. If it's a shower, you're going to have something that will capture that water and carry it away, so it doesn't end up causing problems or creating a hazard of itself. I've got a few pictures here that we've taken over the years that are kind of ugly things that we've seen. Here's a gravity station on the left that I don't know. You could probably get to it, but it's going to be tough to get there. And the question is, if it's in that condition, is it full? When was the last time the water was changed out? Is it within the appropriate date code on that? On the right-hand side, are you going to be able to get to that eye wash station? Well, there are a number of problems here. One, we've got the mop bucket in the way. We've got some obstructions on both sides, and it's too close to the wall. It's going to be really hard for me to be able to get my head where it needs to be if it's too close to the wall. So it should protrude out there about that 18 inches from the wall. Here's some more. This is an interesting one. It has upper left has two different caps on it. One of those is the appropriate one for this eye wash station. The other one was one that they found somewhere else. Will it work right? I don't know. The caps are designed so when I turn that off, it will automatically pop both of those off. If one of those doesn't fit quite as tight, it may not pop free. And once again, if you've got stuff in your eyes, you're not gonna be able to see that there's a problem there. If you look on the upper right, just nasty, right? We've got no access there, no caps in place, and you can see that things are pretty rough looking there. Chances that we have water that comes out of that looking clear and pristine are fairly limited. And then the bottom, now this is one of those personal eye wash stations, but it just wasn't there. And so we've got to inspect these on a regular basis to ensure that they're there. Okay, just a couple of things. People need to be trained on how to properly use these stations, how to turn it on. And it would be good to demonstrate this with your team. All right, here's how it works so people know what to do. You pull the handle and water is instantly going to come out. Here's what the temperature. We've got a tepid water valve on it, so it's just going to be warm. And you're going to stand in it and you're going to wash. And guess what? If I get splashed with a chemical, I need to take my clothes off to remove as much of that chemical as I can. Now, if you're in an area where there's a lot of people around there, some of these eye wash stations will actually have a curtain that you can draw around there, so you can really disrobe and get rid of the clothing that may be soaked with that chemical. Um, I also want to train folks on how to deal if I deal with getting something in my eyes. I need to turn this on, let it flow, and I need to hold my eyes open and get that water in. This is a hard thing to do. If you've ever tried to rinse your eyes out, you'll know that regular water doesn't treat our eyes very well. That's why saline solution is used in those personal eye washes, is it's a little closer to what our tears are like. Regular water gets a little bit irritating itself. And so we have to force ourselves to go in there and open our eyes up, move our eyes around, and get that material rinsed out, and stay there for minimum of 15 minutes. That's a long time washing your eyes. That's a long time standing in a shower, and it may be a cold day. Or there may be people standing around looking at you. That's why we got to train people on it. This is a key thing if we're going to minimize the injury that takes place. All right. We've covered a lot of stuff, but just in summary, I want to review a few of these things. Let's identify where we need these quick drench facilities. Where are they? Where are they required? Where are we using the types of chemicals that could cause this type of injury? And that's where we need that to be. And we need to install those in an accessible location that I can get to. I need to inspect those on a regular basis. I need to flow test those on a regular basis. And in the ANSI standard, remember, that's once a week. I should be documenting those inspections as well, so I can show that it has been done. More important than all of this stuff is, let's protect our eyes. Let's protect ourselves from these nasty chemicals by keeping lids on those things when I do have to dispense those things, wearing a proper personal protective equipment. And if it's one of these really aggressive materials, that's going to be more than just a pair of safety glasses. It's going to be gloves. It's going to be an apron, and with the really aggressive stuff, a face shield as well. So if I'm dispensing acids or bases, I should have all of that personal protective equipment on to prevent us from ever having to use that. But should you have to use it, we want it to work, and that's why we go about doing all of this stuff. All right, Mike, do we have any questions?
Right now we don't have any questions, but folks, if you've got them, type them in here into the chat. Let's try and stump Jason this morning. He's ready and raring. I can see that he wants those questions to come in. We've got some good stuff here. These are one of those things that, safety eye washes, that's a low-hanging ocean fruit, right? They come in, they see an eye wash station. That's something they're going to zone in on, and they're going to really go and inspect. So I think the stuff that you've laid out here is super, super helpful, as it's going to help us not only to avoid the OSHA inspector, but if we ever need to use them, you got to be ready. Can you imagine, like that video you showed of the rust water coming out? You imagine you get some chemical in your eye and you go to wash out and you hit your plunger and you think you're going to get nice clean water. Instead you get rust water. I mean,
Yeah.
that's just some really good stuff there, Jason.
Yeah, absolutely. As I was preparing for this presentation, as I was poking around doing some research, I came across way too many pictures of eye injuries from these nasty chemicals, and it was just really rough to see what's happened to people as this has been there. So let's make sure. Sometimes these things are an afterthought, right? It's just an eye. It's there. Let's make sure it works. Let's make sure it's set up right.
Yeah.
Let's make sure the valve turns the right way. I said that one just popped in. I've seen that a few times where people had plumbed it with just a regular valve, and you had to figure out which way to turn the valve. Instead of having it, I just push on that paddle and it starts flowing. So,
Mm-hmm.
all right. Do we come up with any questions?
Nope, I don't have anything, Jason.
No
You must have covered it
comments?
really well. Go ahead and what's our final word here?
All right, just let's do it. Let's go out, check it today, and verify that those stations are there, that they're working, and document those inspections and put that in place so it's a regular thing. If you don't have those, let's figure out where we need to do those, to put those. And if you've got questions about that, call Mike, call me, and we are happy to walk
Yeah.
you through those decisions that you've got to make there. So thanks, folks.
Absolutely.
Do it right every time. Go home safe every day. All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Everybody go out and have a safe day.